Welcome to channel Qtomation. In last session we have started with the constructor. So we will continue with the constructor concept. So we have seen that constructor is a special type of a function or method that gets executed whenever the object is created. And we have also seen that we cannot give any name to constructor. Constructor is defined by only one way, that is underscore underscore init underscore underscore self. So this is the syntax for defining the constructor. When we create a normal method or instance method, we can give any name to that method, and we can call that method with the help of an object. But for constructor, we have to use only underscore underscore init underscore underscore, right? So this is the way of defining the constructor. We cannot give any name to constructor. Also, we have seen that method can return values, but constructor never return any values. Constructor can also take parameters, that we will see it today, that those constructors are known as parameterized constructor. So far we have seen the constructor which is not taking any parameter. That is basically a default constructor which has only self, right? So we will see that how constructor can take parameters as well. And to call or invoke the method, we have to create object, and we can call those method by using the object. But for calling the constructor, so constructor will get automatically invoked as soon as the object is created. So whenever we instantiate the classes, it automatically calls the constructor, right? So we have also seen one example, right, how to define the constructor. So we have declared one constructor in the my class, and then we have invoked that constructor. So whenever we invoke or whenever we created an object, so as soon as we have created the object, the constructor gets invoked. So this is inside constructor statement got printed. That's what we have seen in previous example. We have also created the method. So we have created method m1 and method m2, and then we have created an object of my class, and by using that object we have called m1 method, which printed this is m1 method. And then we have also seen that method can return the values. We have called the m2 method, which perform the addition operation, that is num1 plus num2, and it returned the value of result that we have stored in variable, that is result variable. And when we printed the value, that is 30, that is 20 plus 10, 30. So we have seen about this much about the constructor. In today's session we will see about parameterized constructor. So we know that method takes parameters. Similarly, constructor can also take parameters. So there are two types of constructor, default constructor and parameterized constructor. So far in this example, the constructor which we have seen is default constructor, because default constructor is a simple constructor which does not accept any arguments. Its definition has only one argument, which is a reference to the instance being constructed, that is the self. So in this example, we have used default constructor. So it is not accepting or it is not taking any additional argument here. It only contains self, which denotes that it belongs to my class. But there are parameterized constructor as well. So constructor with parameters is known as parameterized constructor. So parameterized constructor we will see practically example as well. So parameterized constructor takes first argument as a reference to the instance being constructed, that is self, and as well as along with the self it can also take some additional parameters provided by the programmer. And when we create the object, at that time we know that constructor gets invoked. So if it's a default constructor, we don't have to pass any parameter to that object creation. But whenever we use the parameterized constructor, then during the object creation, we have to pass those parameters as well. Now let's see practically one example about the constructor of parameterized constructor. So I am going to create a new Python file. So let's create a new Python file, constructor So we have created one Python file. Now in this file, first we have to create a class. So I am just going to create a class my class. So we have created a class. Now in this class, how to create a constructor? So I'm just going to create a constructor by def keyword, and we can use only one name for constructor, that is underscore init and self. So this is the default constructor which we have created. But we are now seeing about parameterized constructor. So along with the self, parameterized constructor can take some parameter as well. So in this constructor, I am going to define one more parameter, that is name. Now in this my class, I am going to define one class variable, that is, let's say name equals to John. So here name is a class variable which we have defined inside the class, and this name is basically local variable to this constructor. So this is a class variable and this name is local variable which is limited to this constructor. Now if I want to print value of the name, right? So I want to print this value of the local variable name. So how we can do that? So we can directly access it. So in the method we can directly access the local variable. So I can simply use print name. It will print the value of name which is passed to this constructor. And if I want to print the value of class variable, here name is class variable and I want to print the value of this name, that is class variable. So how we can print the value of class variable inside the method? So how to access it? So we have already seen that to access the class variable inside the method, we can use self.name. Right, so we can use self.name, so it will print the value of John. So here we have created a constructor now. Now let's call or let's create one object. So whenever we create an object, the constructor will get invoked. So how to create an object? So I will simply use my class. So it will create the object, and let's assign some object reference variable to this object. So let's say my obj equals to my class. So we have created an object here. So this will call this constructor, or it will automatically invoke this constructor, and it will print name, that is this name is the value which we will pass here, right? Now let's execute this program and let's see it. So I'm just going to run this file. So when we run this file, let's open the console window. You can see the error here. So what is the error it is saying? So it is saying that init missing one required positional argument name. Why this error occurred? So we have created an object, but we know we have created a parameterized constructor. So this constructor is accepting one parameter as well, name. But while creating the object, we haven't passed any name here. That's why that is giving the error. So whenever we are calling this object, whenever we are creating this object, so we have to pass one parameter. So let's say I am passing value of Jack here. So this value will be passed to constructor name here, and it will print the value of name, that is Jack. This is basically a class variable, so it will print John. So let's run this file. So when we run this file, it is printing Jack, that is the local variable which we have passed here, the value which you are passing during the object creation, that is passing here, and it is printing the value of that name, that is Jack. This print self.name is printing the value of John, that is the class variable. Right? So this is the simple example of parameterized constructor which is accepting one parameter as well. And during the object creation, we have to pass that value. Correct. Now we will see one more example which will cover almost all the topics of constructor. So we can see one more example. So the requirement is, so for the next example, let's say our requirement is we have to create one employee class. In that class, we have to create a constructor which will accept the parameters employee ID, employee name and employee salary. So we have to first create a class. In that class, we have to create a constructor which will accept three parameters: employee ID, employee name, employee salary. And to display that employee information, we have to create another method, that is, let's say, display method. So whenever that display method is called by using object, it should display employee ID, employee name and employee salary. That is, it should display the employee information of that object. Then we can create multiple employee object and we have to display the employee information. So we have seen that we can create multiple objects for a class and every object is independent of each other. So class is a blueprint and we can create as many objects from the class which will have some common attribute and common behavior. But the value might be different. So every employee object will be different. That will have some different information. So that's what we will see how to create that. So we have to first create employee class. Then in that employee class we have to create a constructor which will take 3 parameters, that is employee ID, employee name and employee salary. And then we are creating a method to display information of each employee object, that is employee ID, employee name and employee salary. It should display those information by calling the display method. And we should create multiple employee objects and we should display employee information for those objects. Now let's see practically how we can do that. So I am again going to PyCharm. Now for that we have to create one class. So we will just go one by one. So first we have to create a class employee. So how to create a class? So class employee. So we have created a class. In this class we have to define one constructor. So how to define a constructor? Underscore init self. And that constructor should take 3 parameters. That's what our requirement is. So it should take employee name, EMP ID and EMP salary. So these are 3 variables which that constructor should accept. Now this information which we are going to display by calling another method. But if you see, these 3 are here are local variables to this constructor. So these variables we cannot access outside of this constructor. So for example, if you have to create a display method and you want to access those variable inside the display method, we cannot do that because it's in local variables. So we have to create this local variable to class variables. For example, let's say how to create a class variable. So we can create class variable inside the class. For example, I am creating A. So this is a class variable. And this class variable can be accessed anywhere in the class, in every method which is present inside that class. So it can be accessed anywhere, but local variable we cannot access outside of the method. So we have to convert these 3 variables, that is employee name, employee ID, employee salary, to class variable. Then only we can access those in our display method. So how to convert these 3 variables to class variable inside this constructor, right? So normally if you define it outside of this constructor within the class, then they are the class variable. But in this case we have to convert these variables to class variable within the constructor only. So to do that, what we can do, we can simply use self.emp name. So here I am using self keyword and then I am assigning the value of this employee name to this self.emp name. So now this emp name is a class variable. So once it is a class variable, it can be accessed anywhere inside the class. Similarly, we can write self.empid equals to empid. So we are creating empid variable now is a class variable. We are assigning this empid value to the self.empid, that is going to be a class variable. Similarly, we can use self.emp salary equals to emp sal. So we are now assigning this value to these class variables. So this emp name, emp id and emp salary are now the class variable and they can be accessed anywhere inside the class. So we have created a constructor which is taking 3 parameters, that is employee name, employee id and employee salary. We are converting those values to class variable. So we are assigning those values to self.emp name. So now emp name will become the class variable. Similarly, emp id and emp salary will also become the class variable. And we can access those in some another method, that is display method. So after creating the constructor, now we have to create the display method as well, because our requirement is we have to create a method to display information of employee. So I'm going to create one more method, let's say def display. So this method will display the information of employee. This is an instance method, and in this method we are simply printing employee information. So let's say print employee name is, then comma, and how to access the class variable. So we have already seen how to access class variable, that is employee name, into this method. So how to access it? So we can use self.emp name. So we can access by using self keyword. Similarly, we can print the value of employee ID, self.emp ID, and employee salary as well. So we can simply print employee salary is, comma, self.emp salary. So this method, whenever we call this display method, it should display employee name, employee ID, and employee salary for that specific object. So now we have created a method as well. Now what is the next step? So we have to first create an object. So how to create an object? I am creating employee1 object equals to employee. So we are creating the object here. So as soon as this object is created, the constructor will get invoked. And what this constructor is accepting, it is accepting 3 parameters as well, right? So employee name, employee ID, and employee salary. So in this we have to pass those 3 values as well. So I am passing the first value as, let's say, Jenny, and then we have to pass employee ID, let's say 1, and employee salary is, let's say I am passing 1000. So this Jenny will be assigned to employee name, 1 value will be assigned to employee ID, 1000 will be assigned to employee salary, and this will be converted to class variable. So it will not print those values, it will just assign those values when we invoke the object, right? So when we create the object, it is invoking the constructor and it is assigning those values to class variables. But it's not printing the values because we have to call the display method as well, right? So when we call this display method, then only this print statement will be called and it will print the value of employee name, employee ID, and employee salary. So how to call the display method? So we can use emp1 object, comma, display method. So now this will print the employee information for emp1 object. So let's execute this file. So when we run this file, it will print employee name is Jenny, employee ID is 1, and employee salary is 1000. So that is how we can invoke and we can print the employee information. Right, so this is how we can use the constructor to assign the values to class variable. And whenever we created the object, right, so whenever we created the object, it first invoked the constructor and it assigned the values to it. And when we use the display method, so when we call the display method by using emp1 object, it is printing all the values. So here it is printing Jenny, ID is 1, and employee salary is 1000. Now we know that we can create another object as well. We can create multiple objects. So now I am going to create one more object, emp2 equals to, I am creating the another object, employee, and this time I will pass some another information for this emp2 object. So let's say I am passing it as Daisy, ID is 2, and salary is 3000. So it will assign the value for this object. So every object is independent now. So emp2 object is having emp name as Daisy, ID as 2, and 3000 as a emp salary. So when we call the display method for employee2 object, so let's call the display method. So it should print, let's execute this program. So it will print details of Daisy as well. So if you see, this is the first object information, that is Jenny, ID is 1, salary is 1000, and this is for employee2.display. So employee2 information is employee name is Daisy, employee ID is 2, employee salary is 3000. Similarly, we can create as many objects we can. So we can create any number of objects. Now I am creating employee 3. So how to create the object? Let's say employee, and we have to pass 3 parameters because constructor is accepting 3 parameters. So we have to pass 3 values. Let's say Sam, ID is 3, salary is 5000, and we can use employee3.display method. So it will invoke. So whenever the object is created, the constructor gets invoked. These values are passed to this constructor, and it will be assigned to class variables, employee name, employee ID, and employee salary. And then we are calling the display method by using that object, which will print the value of self.employee name, that is the class variable, that is Sam, ID is 3, salary is 5000. So let's run this file. So we can see the information for all the 3 objects now. Right? So Jenny, information for Jenny object, for Daisy, and for Sam as well. So this is how the constructor is used. So basically we have seen that all classes have function called init, which is always executed when the object is created, that is basically in constructor. We can use constructor to assign values to object properties or other operations that are necessary to do when the object is being created. Right? So constructor, this is about the constructor in Python. So thanks for watching this video, guys. In the coming session, you will see some more topic about Python.